Yeah, sure, sure.
Good evening, everyone. I am Mehak Rathi. I welcome you all to today's webinar on dimensions of legal research. Our esteemed speaker for the day is Professor Dr. Kanu Priya. Ma'am is Professor and Associate Dean of Ansel University. Ma'am is a PhD in constitutional law from Punjab University, Chandigarh, with over 14 years of blended experience in legal practice and academics. With over 20 articles in national and international peer-reviewed reputed journals, her participation in seminars and conferences has always been valued and appreciated. Her book entitled Immigration Laws by LexisNexis highlights the socio-legal impact of overseas Indians in US, UK, and other developed countries. She has been the editor of conference proceedings of International Conference of Environment organized twice by NGT in 2017. She is also featured in Book of Editors of NGT Reporter. She is a member of various organizations like IUCN, CEESP, and GRDS, etc. She's been honored with Women Empowerment Awards by DSLSA and NDMC. She's also a recipient of Award of Honor by Maharaja Agarsen University for her valuable contribution in curriculum and pedagogy development. Her expertise is widely sought as a judge in various moot court competitions, resource person in various national and international conferences. She's also been instrumental in establishing research centers in the organizations she served. Her teaching areas include constitutional law, administrative law, interpretation of statutes, and legal drafting. Ma'am, thank you so much for taking out your valuable time today, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure it will be a great learning experience for all the participants.
Thank you, Mehak. Thanks for such a nice introduction. So a brief introduction about what we are going to cover today is legal research. So basically in legal research, we'll be dealing with how to prepare a research paper, what should be the flow of research, what are the various parameters to do the research and to conduct the research in altogether a new direction so that research, the main objective of research is actually met. Also, we'll be dealing about various categories of research, various kinds of research. We'll be dealing about sources of research, what are the various sources and what are the most authentic sources which we should rely upon. We'll also be covering about the methodologies to write the footnote citations, and we shall also be dealing with the research design, both for a research document as well as for a research paper. So starting with what research is. So basically research is something which is not existing before, or maybe we can say that was existing before, but the way it is linked by a researcher, the way it has been brought forth by a researcher gives it a new shape and dimension. So basically this is a creation of new knowledge, or it may also be the use of existing knowledge in such a creative way that it gives rise to new understandings, new relationships, new methodologies. Research is an integral component of every individual, because I'll give you a very simple example. Say, for example, you have to go to market and buy a particular product. So before you choose a product, you always tend to compare that product with the other categories of products of the similar nature which are available in the market. Why do we do that? Because we need to understand whether the product which we are choosing is meeting our expectation, is able to fulfill the objective that we have in mind. That is why we undergo research in order to compare it with the other products in the market. So for the life of a student, as well as for a professional, specifically when we are in academics, we must understand that research should be the basic component of our delivery at all times. Why do we say so? Because research is the platform on which you shape the future of the students. Without research, we cannot understand anything. Or even if we understand, we will not be able to establish link between one thing and another. So therefore, when we talk about legal profession, whether it be practicing or it be academics, research is very important for both the paths. For research, we always tend to use a tool. But we forgot to understand that research itself is a tool, because it helps us to ascertain the existing doctrines, how are these doctrines applied in practice, how a lawyer is able to devise certain authorities to substantiate his point, how a teacher in a classroom is able to prove his point and help the students understand the concept. So this is a knowledge is something which is not existing in vacuum. Knowledge is something which is always interrelated with each other. So when we say it is interrelated with each other, that relationship, how it exists and what shape it can bring into has to be understood. This is what research is. When we say one thing is knowledge, other is advanced knowledge. So when we reach the level of the advanced knowledge, we call that, yes, we have researched it potently. It's very important in the legal profession that we maintain the dynamics of the society. We keep pace with the changing circumstances. This is what law also says. This is what rule of law has been evolved. So when we say evolution, evolution does not take place individually. It has to take place along with the dynamics of the society. Since the society is changing, we have to change the law. Who changes the law? It's not only the legislature who changes the law. It's not only the judges who give new dimensions to the law. It's we, W-E-V, the word which begins the preamble, because it's we only who research. Unless and until a good lawyer presents a valid point before the court of law, the judges will not dream to bring it into notice. So similarly, the teachers, they research a lot and tend to give new dimensions to the knowledge which is to be given to the students. This is how the students, they adapt to the changing environment. They understand the nuances of the dynamics of the society. This is what research is. Accordingly, Professor Bakshi has rightly said that a lawyer must know much of sociology. Why? Because sociology is something that's dealing with the people. And a sociologist must know much of law, because both are interrelated to each other. It's because of the change in the circumstances of the society that the law is dynamic. Law will certainly lose its dynamic if the society stops changing. For example, during COVID-19, we have not been moving. Our positions are restrained. Our activities are restrained. So accordingly, we are simply dealing with the current situation. We are not able to focus on the future. We are just focusing on how to move out from this crisis. But we will not be able to plan anything for the future because we don't know what the circumstances are going to be. So therefore, it's very important to understand the dynamics of the society and accordingly research on that particular aspect. I've prepared a very interesting, full form of research, because basically what is research? Research is a rational way of thinking. Those who belong to the law field, they might have studied Article 14 to the Constitution of India, and they might have studied the concept of reasonable classification. So when we say reasonable classification, how do we ascertain what is reasonable and what is not reasonable? We ascertain on the basis of intelligible differentia. That means if there are 50 people present, out of those 50, majority of the people will certainly respect you what you're saying. So that is a rational way of thinking. That is going in a particular direction with an objectivity in mind. That is the rational way. E stands for expert and exhaustive treatment. Whenever we feel sick, we always go to a doctor. And before we go to a doctor, we must check. We usually check whether this doctor is a graduate or a postgraduate. So we'll go to a doctor who is specialized in the area, definitely, right? So if we have skin problems, we'll definitely go to a dermatologist. Why not a gastroenterologist? Because a dermatologist will be expert in the area of skin diseases. So therefore, it's very essential to give an expert treatment to the problem that you have in front of you to make your research more comprehensive. It's always better when you have a problem in mind and you want to research on that particular problem. You try and converse with people who are expert in those areas so that you are able to give it an exhaustive treatment, that particular topic. S stands for search for solutions. So we always refer to various sources which are available on the internet nowadays. Otherwise, in the older times, you used to refer to the books or to other journals or other literature which was available. But nowadays, we generally refer to Google, and Google is the solution for everything. No, but Google is not the solution to your research problem. You can refer to sources which are available on Google, but till the time you search all the sources, you won't be able to find a solution to your research problem. So it's very essential to search for those sources. Those sources will give you certainly a clue as to how to find the solution to your problem. E refers to exactness. So many of the times what happens is when a person is researching, he explores a plethora of literature on that particular topic. In that scenario, when the material before you becomes double, triple, or 4 times, you actually lose your focus because you tend to deviate from the actual problem which you identified initially. So it's very important to be exact and precise to what you have thought earlier. A refers to analytical analysis of adequate data. Simply analysis is not enough. We have to analytically analyze. That means even if we have a data which is in front of us and it's already analyzed, we need to give an analysis to that analyzed data, because already it is figured, already it is analyzed in perspective to something which was already there. I'll just give you a very simple example. For example, while preparing the census of the country, we always tend to gather data. So while we gather the data, we write down figures under each head. For example, there are so many males and there are so many females. But now we have to analytically analyze, because say, for example, my problem profile says that the percentage or the ratio of men and women in the state of Kerala is 50-50, while in the state of Bihar or UP, it is not even 40-60. In order to prove that point, the data which is analyzed is between men and women. Their ratio is given in the census, but we will sort out that ratio state-wise. Then we will compare that ratio of one state with another in order to prove our point. So therefore, we have analyzed again the data which was already analyzed. So that is why we say A stands for analytical analysis of adequate data. R stands for relationship between facts and theories. So we have established various theories. For example, we say there's a theory which was propounded by Golaknath versus State of Punjab, doctrine of prospective overruling. So that was also a theory. But probably that particular theory was overruled by Keshavananda Bharati case, and new doctrine came into being. That is doctrine of basic structure. So there may be an instance tomorrow when we ignore the doctrine of basic structure and propound a new theory altogether. How will that happen? That will happen through research. But till the time we are applying that particular theory on the present set of circumstances and negating it, we cannot reach to the conclusion. So therefore, it is only when the existing theories are applied to the facts and circumstances which are prevailing vis-a-vis the research problem, then only we'll be able to understand whether this theory is applicable or it needs to be modified, or in the present circumstances, a new theory needs to be generated. So a researcher can very well generate a new theory. C stands for critical observation. So we have already analyzed the data that we had, but what is required is critical analysis. Why do we do critical analysis? Because we want to bring something new. Very simple. Research is the name for something new. Critical means that you're criticizing what is existing. Why? Because the present which is existing is not able to meet the desired objective in mind. So if we don't criticize the existing set of circumstances or set of facts, then how will we reach the new observations? See, it's only after criticizing the present we give way to the new future, new theories, new dimensions. H stands for honesty and hard work in all respects of treatment of data. Why do we say honesty and hard work? Because ethics is the main core of research always. Being a teacher having more than 18-20 years of experience, we understand that the students nowadays, when are given any assignment, they usually copy paste the assignment and give you. But the problem is not with the students, the problem is with the teachers. Why? Because the teachers, they expect that the students can write a research paper straight away without writing a 1-pager or a 2-pager or a 3-pager. We directly give them an assignment. That is not correct. Encourage the skill of writing in the students so that they're able to write by their own. That's why UGC has to come up with the rules against plagiarism. Because researchers, most of the times, they don't maintain the ethics. They don't put in their hard work. They don't maintain the honesty. And they don't give credit to the sources they have explored. So therefore, considering all these aspects together, they form the research. Coming to the flow of research, it's very important to start with bits and pieces and then make a bulk out of it. Or when we are climbing a ladder, we must step on the first foot first, then second, and then proceed on. So therefore, we always refer to Bloom's taxonomy for that purpose. Bloom's taxonomy has provided us with 6 stages of research. These 6 stages starts from identification of the concept to the creation of or the production of new work. So when we say identification is to remember. For example, I'll give you a very simple example. Like, consider a topic. I want to research on, say, sexual harassment. It's very much prevalent, and that too with the Me Too movement, it was very much prevalent. So Me Too movement came. So I thought, okay, fine, I'll research on the Me Too movement. So I identified what Me Too movement is. Just identified. I just defined what is Me Too movement. Me Too movement refers to the sexual harassment cases. And that too with big shot people. In the second stage, I tried and understand as to what is sexual harassment. How did it came into being? Right? So till the time you understand what is sexual harassment, you won't be able to explore or delve into the technicality of this particular problem. So sexual harassment is what? Got it. How did it came into being? With Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan. Then what thereafter? Composition of ICC. But from where ICC came into being? Internal Complaints Committee. Why were the corporates required to establish Internal Complaints Committee in their own organizations? Because of Sexual Harassment Act 2013. So this is the understanding. That means I interrelated what was the topic given to me with its various dimensions, which led to the formation of the topic. Right? Now, how is the sexual harassment applicable to the Me Too movement or has led to the rise of Me Too movement? That is, what is the relationship between Me Too movement and sexual harassment? That I will try and understand. Right? So I found out that there are many organizations in which the ICC has not been constituted. I got my space. I got my gap. Okay, fine. That is why Me Too movement has come into being. Or maybe the working of ICC committee was not as per the objective laid down in the Act. right? So once I clear 3 stages, then only I'll be able to understand my actual problem and my area of research, where I want to research and what I want to analyze, right? So after 3 stages only, you'll come to stage 4, which is analyzing the particular research problem. Got it? So you have the problem in your mind, you have a set of circumstances. Now that particular problem has emerged out of that set of circumstances. Now you will tend to analyze, where is the problem, how this problem came into being. Or even if the act was present, this particular problem was ignored, or the committees were not functioning properly, right? You will try to interview various organizations or check the records of various organizations, whether there was any sexual harassment committee which was constituted in these organizations. If yes, how many cases were dealt with by those committees in the past, say for example 5 years, right? And if those cases were decided, whether it is that majority of the cases were dismissed, or certain penalties were also imposed on the persons who committed sexual harassment. So there comes the analysis. Once you do the analysis, then you tend to evaluate your results, right? You have done the analysis, you have the results in your hand, right? You know that, okay, fine, out of 50, 40 organizations, they had the ICC in place, and 10 of the organizations didn't have the ICC in place. So this is one parameter which you want to evaluate. Okay, fine, Me Too movement might have come out of these 10 organizations which do not have ICC in place, right? Another aspect is, out of 40 organizations which had ICC in place, barely 10 of the organizations have conducted any or have dealt with any sexual harassment case in the past 5 years. Again, you got another result. You got another evaluation criteria, that out of 50 organizations that you interviewed, 10 did not have any ICC, and the remaining 30, they did not entertain any sexual harassment case in the organization. So that means defunct. The ICC was not at all functioning in those organizations, right? You may go even a step further, that those 40 organizations, whether any such complaints were filed by any individual or by any employee or by a student or any other organization, any other member of the organization. If yes, certainly you get another criteria. And for those 10 organizations who had ICC in place also, and they dealt with certain sexual harassment cases also, out of those 10, 5 organizations didn't proceed or didn't penalize any of the offender there. So ICC was in place, they had cases also, but they didn't function to achieve the objective of the act. So what you're left with, that out of 50 organizations, only 5 organizations were there who were actually implementing the objectives of the Act of 2013. Got the result? Right? So you've done the evaluation. But one thing is still left. Based upon your evaluation, you have to suggest certain recommendations. Right? That is creation. So I, being a researcher, did this research work. Now I have written it to the Ministry of Human Resources and Development that these organizations, based on my research, this is the data and this is the result. So we need to create a very strong implementation authority for the Act of 2013. That's my recommendation. That's my creation. Right? So the creation is not the research paper out of it. Creation is not the thesis that you have submitted in your master's or doctorate. Creation is when you tend to bring a substantial change in the system and bring in certain reformations through your research. That is what creation is. Right? I hope I'm clear how these stages, they help you develop your research work. So your research should also flow in this way. In other words, this Bloom's taxonomy has actually led to the formation of the research design. So I'll come to the research design also, but before we come to the research design, let's understand what are the various types of research. Right? Now, you guys will say research is research. Research is to bring in something new, but there are various ways in which we do the research, in which we implement our research methodology. Right? So there are various methods of conducting research. Research is not merely writing a research paper, but what format you are using to write the research paper, what modalities you are using to conduct your research, what methodology you are adopting. That is what actually amounts to research. For example, I'll give you an example. Rarest of the rare doctrine you might have heard about. While giving capital punishment for murder, right? So if a person has committed a murder, he is now convicted by the High Court for capital punishment. The doctrine of rarest of the rare cases is applied. For example, in Nirbhaya case, right? 3 of the offenders, they were given capital punishment. So capital punishment is awarded to a person who has committed a murder by the High Court, but he has a right to file an appeal. He filed an appeal in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court reversed the decision of the High Court and converted that capital punishment into life sentence, right? Stating that this doctrine of rarest and rare cases is not applied here. So therefore, this case is fit for life sentence and not for capital punishment. What are the various parameters for applying the doctrine of the rarest and the rare? Do we have any sets of rules and regulations or guidelines framed by the Supreme Court itself or by the High Courts that these are the various parameters on which you should apply this, doctrine of the rarest and the rare? No. Now, how to ascertain that? What I did is, being a researcher, I took out 50 judgments in which the High Courts have awarded capital punishment, but the same cases, when approached in the Supreme Court, that sentence of capital punishment has now been converted into life sentence. I tried and analyzed. I extracted about 10 parameters on the basis of which the Supreme Court reversed the decision of the High Court. I came to the conclusion, okay, fine, this does not constitute rarest of the rare. How do I get to know those guidelines? Through research. Now, this kind of research is purely applied research. It's purely conceptual. It's revolving around the single concept. And when we talk about legal research, this kind of research is always known as case study research, because it is purely based on cases. It is purely based on the judgments given by the High Court and then by the Supreme Court. So it's very important to understand what category of research you are doing. It may also be termed as analytical research, right? So a research which merely describes a theory and its application on the present and the future circumstances is known as descriptive research. But the same research, when involves around a particular issue, a particular theory, and its analysis also, it is called analytical research. In science, generally, we use the word applied or pure research. Why? Because applied is when you apply formulas, and pure is when you are simply talking about the established formulas, right? So it may be applied or pure, which is generally not used in social sciences research. Quantitative and qualitative research, it's very important. These are the quantitative and qualitative research, as well as doctrinal and non-doctrinal research. These are the two kinds of research which majority of the researchers they use in their dissertations or thesis. Quantitative research is mainly statistical research, which is based on the quantums. How many, right? So if the initial example that we gave you about the men-women ratio in the States is purely quantitative because that is purely based on numbers. So for numbers, we may refer to the census data, we may refer to various reports of organizations. So if we talk about, SDG goals and the carbon emission, then also we'll always refer to the quantum of carbon emission by or the carbon footprint of various countries. Again, that is quantitative. Qualitative is which is purely based on the subject. Right? You have a concept in mind. The whole research is revolving around that concept. It doesn't involve numbers. That is qualitative. It may also be made in sync with conceptual research because again, we are revolving around a concept. We are analyzing the concept. So it becomes conceptual. Right? The other form of quantitative research is empirical research also. But the difference is in quantitative research, you use the existing sources, that is the secondary sources. Whereas in empirical research, you always collect the first-hand data. When we say first-hand data, that means you prepare a questionnaire, interview respondents, collect the data, and then analyze it. You may comprehend that data with the existing numbers, but the basic source remains the first-hand information. These are also called primary sources. So when you collect the data by yourself, it is called a primary source. Nowadays, majority of the people, they distribute the Google form. Okay, fine, fill this Google form and send it to me. So what you do, being a researcher, you always analyze. First, you compile the data that you receive through the Google forms, and then you analyze it. This kind of research is called empirical research. Doctrinal and non-doctrinal, which is very important. Doctrinal research is purely based upon the existing set of theories, existing set of apprehensions, existing data. You don't devise or you don't collect anything new. In majority of the cases in doctrinal researches, for example, if I want to, analyze the interrelationship of Article 21 and Article 22 of the Constitution of India. On one side, I'm saying I have the right to personal liberty. On the other side, I'm saying I don't have the right to personal liberty because I'm arrested. Or I don't have the personal liberty even during preventive detention. What is the interrelationship between both the articles? That is a kind of doctrinal research. A non-doctrinal research is always a combination of doctrinal and empirical. You tend to understand or you tend to analyze the legislations or the provisions, and then you try to comprehend those provisions with the first-hand information. That is non-doctrinal. For example, we are talking about CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act. On one side, we analyzed what Citizenship Amendment Act is, how it evolved right from 1955 when the Citizenship Act was enacted, until date, what are the various amendments that has been brought into this act. We also interrelate it with the secular nature of the Indian Constitution. But at the same time, we also collect the first-hand information from the data, from the questionnaire, from the people either in the state of Assam or from the people who were a part of the riots in Delhi. We collect the data, analyze that data, then relate that data with the earlier study that we have conducted and try to come to a conclusion. That is a non-doctrinal research. In the era of the global world, it's very essential. For example, during COVID-19, imagine a situation that the virus was released by China to the whole world. We knew that this virus has been released, but we were not known as to how this virus is being dealt by various other countries and what other protections were taken by them. Consider a situation we didn't know anything about it. We just had a bunch of guidelines which were released by the WHO. That's it, nothing beyond that. Would have been in a situation to control this pandemic in such an effective way? No. We were able to control it, being the second most populous country in the world, only because we could witness in the initial stages as to what disaster it has caused in Italy, in UK, in Europe, or in US. Understanding their perspective, relating it with their state of living or their governance, we adopted measures here in India to curtail it, to control it. How were we able to do that? By comparison. That is called comparative research. So unless and until we are able to compare it with other nations, we will not be able to implement it effectively. That was what our research goal was. That we are researching it because we want an effective measure to control it. And we succeeded because we compared it with other nations. So comparative research is actually very important in this era of globalization. What is the research problem? How do you identify what is my problem? Majority of the times, whenever we have to conduct a research, a particular topic comes in mind. We don't know what to research about this topic, isn't it? So when a topic comes in my mind, I always try to find out literature relating to that topic. That means I do the literature review, right? These are the various steps. You identify a problem and then you identify a topic and then find out the literature on that. You collect the data on that. Once you collect the data, then you realize that about this particular topic, what was bothering me, that is certainly not there in this literature. Now, that particular thing, that particular goal, which you thought is your question, right? That becomes your research question, right? So your research question was not answered by the given literature. Since your question was not answered by the given literature, there is a gap. This gap we call as the research gap, right? Now, this research question gave you the research gap, and from that research gap, you devise your hypothesis. Right? So your research question was missing. Either you write a research question or you write hypothesis. You cannot write both the things in your research assignment. Right? It's not like that you first write the research question and then you write the hypothesis also. No. You have to write either of these things. Hypothesis is very essential when your research is based on data analysis. You cannot do with the research question. But when your research is purely doctrinal, you can also write the research question. Hypothesis is not essential. Right? So I'm basically talking about either a dissertation or a thesis here, when we have to write a research question or a hypothesis. So you've got your hypothesis. I'll come to what is hypothesis in detail and how you have to write the hypothesis later. So once you are clear with what your hypothesis is, because your hypothesis is your goal, that is your objective of research, then you start analyzing your real problem. Then you are able to identify what is your research problem and how you have to go about it. Then you start finding the solutions to your problem. Right? So between hypothesis and between solution is the complete Bloom's taxonomy that we refer to the initial slide. Right? So your problem becomes your identification stage 1 of the Bloom's taxonomy. And from there, you have to grow up to stage 6. That is research. So what is most difficult in research is to devise your research question or the hypothesis. Once this is ready, then you are never deviated from your original task. The biggest confusion arises when you have to do the literature review, because while doing the literature review, majority of the times you don't find the gap. When you don't find the gap, that means your research is not apt, or you are not thinking in the right direction. You're not analyzing the analyzed literature. You're not able to critically evaluate what you have. So that is why it's very essential to do the literature review very precisely, very clearly, with a clear-cut objective in mind that this is what you want. Right? So therefore, this is how the research is to be carried out. Coming to the sources of research. In majority of the cases, we usually say, what are the different sources of research? Primary sources and secondary sources, that's it. Right? So broadly, these are divided into 2 types only. One is primary sources and the other is secondary sources. So primary sources can be very well identified from the fact that this is the first-hand information. That means whenever you conduct a survey, send a questionnaire, collect the data and do the analysis. And majority of the times, these primary sources are used only in social legal research. Right? Nevertheless, it is very essential to comprehend the qualitative research, right, and add to the non-doctrinal research always. But confining primary sources is only the survey sample, the questionnaire method and data collection. That's it. So you cannot include even the statistical data in the primary sources. No. So there are various reports of various organizations, even the census data, all that is included in the secondary sources. Right? So secondary sources, sometimes we, in legal research, we generally divide the sources into secondary sources is one which are very clear in nature. For example, books are there, journals, newspapers, manuals, or the encyclopedia that we have. These are generally configured as secondary sources. These are very crisp secondary sources. Besides that, various cases, statutes, rules, regulations, notifications which are released by various ministries from time to time, these come under the head of primary authority. So broadly, these are categorized into primary and secondary only. But when we talk about legal research, because law is a dynamic area, it is evolving every day. So therefore, secondary sources as such cannot cater to that updation, cannot cater to that dynamic. So therefore, we divide it further into primary authorities and updates also. So primary authorities are the rules, regulations, and even the judgments. But updates are, for example, you never know. So nowadays, Manu Patra and SEC Online, they help you understand whether this particular judgment is overruled or not. Sometimes the judgment may be overruled by legislation as well. So how to check it? So these online resources, they help you check it because they have tagged those cases. But otherwise, you may refer to a particular case and that case is already overruled by a higher court. So it's essential to refer to updates always in legal research. There may be a situation. For example, I'll give you a very simple example, Article 13, Clause 4. Any law which refers to the amendment of the Constitution under Article 368 does not include or cannot be considered as law within the meaning of Article 13. But Keshavananda Bharati judgment has clearly laid down the doctrine of basic structure. Though Clause 4 is still there under Article 13, but that Clause 4, in cases where that overrides basic structure, is already covered by Keshavananda Bharati judgment. Right? So therefore, it's very essential to be updated always in legal research and know what is overruled by what. A judgment may be overruled by legislation. or vice versa. Or a judgment may be overruled by another judgment of the higher court. So you have to be updated always and be in touch with contemporaneous of the topic or the problem. Another thing which I want to highlight specifically is, while exploring the sources, whether it is secondary sources, because nowadays majority of the times you do research on Google. And whenever you research a topic on Google search engine, the first website that it lists is always Wikipedia. So do you think Wikipedia is an authentic source and you should rely upon what is written in Wikipedia? I say no. Why? Because even I can edit what is written in Wikipedia about anybody. Wikipedia is completely an editable platform. Anybody can edit it. So if anybody can edit it, do you think it's an authentic source and you should refer it to in your research? Never. So after so many years in academics, I always say that any student who has referred to Wikipedia is not a good researcher at all. So that gives you a first impression that this particular student is not a good researcher, whosoever has referred to Wikipedia. You know, you need to write down the complete link of the website in your footnote. So when you have written Wikipedia in your footnote, the impression goes like that. Okay, fine, this is rejected, done. Right? I do respect personal opinions, but a personal opinion cannot be relied upon. You can refer to it, but you cannot rely upon it. Just like our court structure, we can always refer to the judgments which are given by foreign courts, but we cannot rely upon those judgments. Any Indian judgment will never rely upon any judgment which is given by a foreign court. Similarly, we can refer to personal stories which are available on personal blogs on the websites, but we cannot rely upon them. That cannot be the basis of our study. That can merely be a point of reference. But it's always better not to cite the personal blogs as well. Unless and until the area of research is very compelling. And then your study is purely based on personal opinions. And that gives weightage. In that case, you'll not be relying upon one personal page. You'll be relying upon multiple personal pages and comparing between them. That's altogether different. But Wikipedia is clearly no. Coming to the research design. So I'll be dealing with mainly two areas. One, the students of masters who have to write down a dissertation, or the research scholars who have to write down their thesis, and the normal academicians or the students who have to write down a research paper. So dealing with the research paper first, what is important in your research paper? You identify a title, then you write an abstract of maybe 200 to 300 words. Then you give 5 to 7 keywords that will help you find your research paper. Then you give introduction to your problem, research problem which you have identified initially, right? Do you write the literature review in the research paper? No, never. So you just write down the introduction, give a brief background as to how this topic of this particular topic has emerged. You analyze it with the present circumstances, how this particular topic is fitting in the present circumstances and what is not being covered in the present circumstances. That means you try to find out the solution to your problem, and then you give your conclusions and suggestions. So it's very brief. Research paper is very briefly written always. It's never very detailed. So while analyzing the problem, you may split into different topics, or while giving the introduction, if your topic covers 3-4 aspects, you can cover that in your introduction and the background. But it is never elaborate. You have to confine yourself to the solution of your problem by way of analysis of the problem in the present circumstances. That is about the research paper. But when we talk about a dissertation or a thesis, you must understand or you must be able to convey as to how you devised your research problem and what methodology you have adopted to conduct your research, right? So you must start with identification of the title, introduction. In introduction, you will acquaint the audience with your problem profile. You will give the background, right? Because it is a detailed research, you must be clear about the objective and the scope of your research, which should be laid beforehand, before going for literature review, right? So what you want to research upon, what is the objectivity of your research, what is the extent of your research has to be laid down. Then you go for literature review. In your literature review, you try to explore all the secondary sources that are available, not the primary sources, I'm sorry. Primary sources are always used in conducting your research, in analyzing the problem, not in finding the research gap. So your literature review should be exploring all the secondary sources, whether it be websites, whether it be articles, whether it be books, journals, or any other written and published material. You analyze those material, but you were not able to identify, or you could not find the research question that was there in your mind. That research question will frame your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is nothing else but your goal, ultimate goal of research. How to reach there? There should be a proper process. That process is the research methodology. Here you will define what kind of research you are going to conduct, whether you are going to conduct a doctrinal research, non-doctrinal research, a comparative research, an empirical research, a statistical research, or a pure research or a conceptual research, what? So this is the place where you have to define. Now, if you are defining an empirical research, what is most important is to define your sample. Okay, fine. I want to research upon, I want to analyze the current situation of women who are working in corporates and the problems they are facing in Delhi NCR, right? So this is my research problem. Problems faced by women working in corporates in Delhi NCR, right? Now I have to define my sample. My sample is the jurisdictional restriction is Delhi NCR, territorial restriction, Delhi NCR. How many corporates? 100 corporates, right? How many respondents I will question? Almost 500, at least 5 from each corporate. Itni to women hongi, right? So I'll be questioning those women. What are the problems faced by them? So this is my research sample. I have identified the geographical territory. I have identified the number of the corporates. I have identified the number of my respondents, and also, if possible, list down the parameters, which you might not be able to initially, but if possible, or if you have conducted a pilot study initially, you should be very well able to list down your parameters. Parameters mane to, that means health problems faced by women, right? Work-life balance faced by women, transportation issues faced by women, right? So these become the parameters. So if possible, you can also write down the parameters. So once you do that, then you start analyzing your problem. That analysis should be in the form of various chapters, starting from introduction. So what is this complete part till the research methodology and the tentative chapterization? That becomes the first chapter of your dissertation or thesis, which is called introduction, right? From second chapter onwards, you start with historical background in detail, coming to the present set of circumstances. If there is any comparison, then comparative with another nation, then analysis of the problem, and finally conclusions and suggestions. I've seen people who are writing dissertation or thesis comprising of 10, 12 chapters. No, but ideally, your dissertation or thesis should comprise of maximum 5 to 7 chapters. That's it, not more than that. Lesser the number of chapters, more crisp, more precise, and more effective your research work is. How to identify the title of your research proposal? That's very essential, right? For example, just now I gave you the example, study about problems faced by women. So one way is I give the title problems faced by women. Is it clear from my title what I'm talking about? Problems faced by women? Which women? Women all over the world? Or no, it's not very clear, no? So while you're choosing the title for your research proposal, it must be descriptive and informatory. That means it must gives you all the ins and outs of your research proposal. What you're talking about, what is your confinement zone, what is your extent also, right? So for example, if I presume that my research is a box, right? So my title must be conversant with the complete inside area of the box along with the boundary. We are not bothered about what is outside that boundary, or we should also not be confined upon one particular wall of that box. No, the title must cover the complete box, the area of the box along with the walls, right? So it's very essential that your research topic is completely reflecting on the area of your research as well as the subject matter itself. So in the previous research proposal that I gave, my topic should be something like this. My title should be something like this: problem faced by women working in corporates, colon, a specific study of Delhi NCR region. Am I precise? Although आपको लग रहा होगा कि the title is too long, but it's essential in this particular research. This particular title is formulated which is based on the actual research problem. It's highlighting what I am going to research upon. It's highlighting the scope of the research. My scope is limited to Delhi NCR region, not beyond that. Right? So it's very essential that the title you choose must be able to explain the complete research area. It should be descriptive. It should not be limited to one particular aspect of your research. And to test it, whether your title is apt or not, refer to Bloom's taxonomy. Whether it is able to cover stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as well. If yes, then your title is perfect. Coming to literature review. While you're doing the literature review, it's very important that you always refer to published work, majority of the times. I generally don't give suggestion to refer to unpublished work unless and until your research is based on unpublished work. There may be a situation as it happened with me almost 10 years back when I was doing my research. I was doing research on an area on which there was no published work available. I had to refer to the blogs of the people. I had to refer to the stories of the people and make conclusions out of it, comprehended by empirical research. So if you're relying upon unpublished work, you must do the empirical research. That's a key point. So you must find out what is the variable in your research. You must look out for that variable in your sources of research. So say for instance, I'm researching about how many contractual agreements, or say for example, I'm doing the research on, I'll take a different topic this time. I'm doing a research on that majority of the cases where an arbitration has taken place, the award is challenged in the court. Right, so this is my hypothesis. or this is my research problem I've identified. Now, what will I do? I'll check the records of the courts, that how many cases they get on account of arbitral awards being challenged here. So I confine my study to a particular region, say for the state of Delhi only. Not even Haryana, not even UP, which are adjoining. No, only Delhi. That in the Delhi courts, how many cases are filed in 1 year against the arbitral awards or challenging the arbitral awards. I tried to find out the literature. So 1 article, 2 article, 3 article. So I realized that in majority of those articles, they were talking about the ad hoc concept of arbitration and not the institutional arbitration, which is still not prevalent here in India. So I found out that, okay, fine, it is pertaining to ad hoc arbitration only. I cannot even pick up institutional arbitration because institutional arbitration becomes more or less at the is opted for at the international level and not at the in the local issues or the private agreements. So I found out a variable, that is ad hoc arbitration, right? Now this particular concept of ad hoc arbitration has a direct impact on the problem which I have identified. Maybe the arbitrators are not sound enough. Maybe the arbitrators are not able to satisfy both the parties. There may be various reasons. So I found out a channel. Okay, fine. This is my literature. My literature has given me a clue that there is a lack in the performance of the arbitrators. I converted my study into empirical study. I will interview almost 100, 200 arbitrators and find out the conclusions, fix the parameters. Interesting. So sometimes your literature review is able to acquaint you with a variable which gives you the direction for your research. I got the research question, I framed my hypothesis and moved forward with my research. So one warning that I want to give to all the attendees today is avoid redundancy of work. Always gather the data which is directly related to your research problem. Because now is the era of data explosion and you have abundant data. So it's very essential that you should be confined to what your research problem is and gather the data only relating to your research problem and not beyond that. Be systematic as much as you can be. For example, I have divided my chapters. Now, when I have to gather the data, I must gather the data chapter-wise. So for a research, it's very essential to be systematic with the flow of the research, right? Sometimes while reading okay, fine, this article is really very interesting. It can fit into my, chapter 5. Even if I'm researching for chapter 1, I find the data which is relevant to chapter 5, I put it in the respective folder. Okay, fine. When I'll touch chapter 5, I'll refer to this particular article. Fairly good enough. More organized, more systematized. You have to be, right? So it's very essential that after doing the literature review, you are able to comprehend your hypothesis, because your literature review will only help you identify the research gap. But how to develop hypothesis from it is very critical. In order to understand what hypothesis is, because you can use both the words hypothesis as well as hypothesis. So when we say hypothesis, it's singular. So whenever you have a single statement for your hypothesis, it is called hypothesis, SIS. But when you have multiple statements to prove, it becomes plural, hypothesis, SES. So be particular about it. Majority of the people, they write a question in their hypothesis. Whether majority of the agreements led to the challenge of arbitral award in case of conflict. But let me make it clear A hypothesis is never written in the form of a question. It's merely a statement that gives a prediction. Okay, fine, after my research, this will be the finding. For example, in the given example itself, I state majority of the local agreements in which arbitration is referred to, the arbitral award is challenged in the court of law. Now, this particular statement is given by me as a researcher. At the end of the research, I may also be able to find that, no, this is not the case. In majority of the agreements, the arbitral award is not challenged. Arbitral award is challenged in very less number of cases. So it's not essential that whatever statement you give in the beginning should be only the result in your case. The result may be reverse. Right? For example, when I conducted a research 10-15 years back, so my hypothesis was that the people migrate from India to foreign countries, to the developed nations in the lure of money, but they always tend to come back whenever such opportunity arises. But my hypothesis proved to be wrong. After I interviewed majority of the people, they tried settling back here in India, but they were not able to. They moved back to the foreign countries. So I proved myself wrong through my research. This may also happen. So it's not essential that the statement which you are writing has to be proven. That statement may be proven wrong otherwise. Fine. So it's not essential you can measure it. It may be an unmeasurable thing as well. But it must be in the form of a statement, a presumption, you can say, that you tend to arrive at. I hope I'm able to clear what hypothesis is. Next is key points. I'm towards the end of my presentation. So I'm just highlighting the major key points which you must keep in mind while you're conducting a research. The most important is that you have to be critical. While doing the literature review, while analyzing the data that you have to be critical. That means the major presumption that you are able to arrive at is negated. You have to move in the other direction. You don't accept what is in front of you. If you will accept what is in front of you, then there is no research. If you're not accepting what is in front of you, then only you'll be able to give a new direction. And then only something new will be formed. And research is the name of something new. Second is be systematic in your inquiry. So this is what I initially said as well. Be systematic in researching, in exploring the sources, be systematic in maintaining the data, and be systematic in your flow of research. The third point is be contemporary. As already said, that law is a dynamic profession. You have to be updated with the recent knowledge. You have to maintain pace with the society dynamics. Then only your research will be fruitful. Research is not about doing something which has already been done in the past. Research is about giving shape to the future. Fourth point is research has to be very significant. Don't conduct a research which has no value in the market. Conduct a research which becomes a value for lifelong. For example, Professor Madhav Menon, he explored the idea of clinical legal education. Legal education was already in existence. But clinical legal education, the concept by its own nature is very important, because this is an education which is a prerequisite for a profession. So don't you think that this education must make the students acquainted with the nuances of the profession? That is the concept of clinical legal education, teaching them the practical insights of this particular kind of education, the legal education. Understand the limitations. While I'm exploring the research, it might be possible that the data is not given to me. Say, for example, if I'm talking about arbitration, you know that the whole process of arbitration is very confidential. Even the arbitrator cannot reveal the identity of the parties. What to talk about what was decided in the arbitral award. So one must understand the limitations which one has to face while conducting the research. And that should be dealt with beforehand. Kept in mind that, okay, fine, while I'll conduct my research, I'll not be able to have recourse to this information because of this limitation. For example, I'm comparing my system with the system of US and I don't have money to travel to US to understand their system. How will I get to know about that system? That's again my limitation, right? So there may be any kind of limitation which becomes an impediment towards your research, which becomes a hindrance in the execution of your research methodology. Answer the research questions. That's the last key point. So you'll be able to reach your goal only if you are able to answer your research question. It's not essential that the research question should be answered always in yes or always in no. No. Answer may be anything, either yes or no, either positive or negative. But there must be an answer. Till the time you are able to get answer to the research question. So once you're done with your research, you're done with your findings, you always go back to your research question. Okay, fine, this was my hypothesis. Am I able to directly link my finding with my hypothesis or with my research question? If yes, your research is successful. Last, footnoting pattern. So while we are talking about writing a research paper or a dissertation or a thesis, we always do write down the footnotes. There are various citation methods which are, applicable. Somebody uses ILI, somebody uses APA, somebody uses OSCOLA. For international editions, it's always, Blue Book, which is largely used. So mainly when we say writing a legal research, we generally use two methods. ILI is very much prevalent when it comes to national research, national legal research. It refers to Indian Law Institute's citation method. It's available online. All the methods are available online, so you can have the key points to them. Another international which is largely used is Blue Book edition. So initially it was Blue Book 19th edition, but now we have the 20th edition, which is largely in place. But one trick which I want to give you to all is the format of writing or the flow of writing the footnote. It never changes. You go to any edition, you go to any citation method, this flow will never change. What is that flow? First of all, you write down the author of any source. So if you found an article on website, again, it will be written by an author. If you found a report of any organization, that report will belong to an organization. That organization becomes the author, right? If you're talking about a book, the author of the book becomes the author. If you're talking about a newspaper and a person has written an editorial in that newspaper, again, there is an author. That author I'm talking about. Author followed by title. Title of what? Title of the source. If it is an article, title of the article. If it is a book, the name of the book. If you're referring to a particular website, there also you are referring to a particular component on the website, the title of that component. If you are referring to a newspaper article, the title of that newspaper article. If you are referring to a report, the title of the report. So whatever you are referring to, it has a title. That title has to be written. Followed by source. Now source is what? The sources that we discussed in one of the slides. primary source or secondary source. Primary source, of course, you will not cite anywhere in your research because that is explored by the researcher himself or herself. But when we talk about secondary sources, it may be a newspaper. Name of the newspaper is the source. It may be a book. The publisher is the source. If it is an article published in a journal, the name of the journal is the source. If it's an article published in a case manual, or if it is a case, then the citation of the case is the source. Or if you have taken a material from a particular website, then you have to paste the complete link of that particular website. Not only the website, but the page of the website on which you found out that article. On the web browser, you always find that complete link. It doesn't start from www, it starts from HTTP. So you have to copy and paste the entire link from there, followed by the date of the newspaper, the date of the publication of the journal, or the date on which you accessed the website, or the date of, or the year of publication of the book in case of a book. So if you're referring to a website, then you must write accessed on or last visited on so and so date. So it's very essential, right? So this flow will never change whatever citation method you follow. So if you keep in mind that you have to mention these 4 things always in your citation, always in your footnote, the flow will remain the same. Author followed by title, followed by source, followed by date. I hope I'm clear and I'm done. Now I'm open to all the queries that you have.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a very detailed and a very insightful session. I mean, you've covered each and everything that a person needs for starting research. More than questions, we have messages that the session was insightful, but I'll just read out the questions for you. The
Sure.
first question is, what's the fundamental difference between legal research and other social sciences research?
So basically, legal science, legal research is not less than a social research. So whenever we explore various international resources and there is no separate column for law, you will always find law under social sciences. So law is always a component of social science research, always. So legal research only varies to the extent of those 2 sources of research which I pinpointed in my PPT, that is primary authorities as well as updates, right? So when we talk about specifically judgments, then these are included in legal research. So legal research is exceptional to the extent wherein the research is purely based on cases, purely based on judgments. So we call it as case-based research.
Right. Ma'am, the next question is, kindly explain the importance of hypothecation in research.
Hypothecation is something which you presume in the beginning of the research. And it's a statement which you try to prove through your research. So research is followed by hypothecation. So unless and until you have a hypotheticated value, for example, I think you are from a maths background, and if you are, I'll explain you in that terminology. So whenever you have to solve a particular statement, so say for example, x minus y is equal to this much and y is this. So you have to always hypothecate a value. Okay, presume y is equal to x plus 1. Then you impose y's value into that statement, and then you find out the value of x. So hypothecation is always very essential to give results.
Right. Ma'am, the next question is, according to you, what would be the ideal methodology for legal research?
If it is purely a legal research, I will always, recommend a non-doctrinal research which combines the doctrinal as well as the empirical, because law is a combination of law and society taken together. So whenever there are certain parameters which disturb the society or which create an impact on the society, it has to be analyzed by, studying the society, by empirically studying the society. So first-hand collection of data is really very essential. And one thing I tell you, that once you have the first-hand data in your hand and your research is based on that or comprehended with the help of empirical data, then nobody can challenge your research. So it's completely a foolproof research always.
Right. The next question is, ma'am, if a research scholar is doing research by using doctrinal and non-doctrinal method, what is that research called?
So basically, either he will use doctrinal or he will use non-doctrinal. So non-doctrinal is basically a combination of doctrinal as well as empirical taken together. So this is what I was explaining just now, that non-doctrinal research is the most effective research when we talk about legal research, because it combines your existing theories, your existing legislations, and their applications to the society.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question is, what is the difference between title and source?
See, title is the title which you have given to your research. Source is merely the database that you tend to explore to add to your research. Title should be very detailed so that it is giving all the perspectives of your research. For example, if I have to write an article, I must give a title to my article. That is the title. So if I'm writing an article on how many, the students who attended my lecture were very impressed or they gained a lot of knowledge from my lecture, right? So that is my problem. But what will be the title? Right? The title will be a session on dimensions of legal education and its implications. That can be the title. So that talks about the session as well as the impact of the session also, right? So that becomes the title. But what is the source? Source is this Zoom platform where we conducted this lecture. Source is the people who all attended this lecture.
Right. Ma'am, the next question is, as you have mentioned that we should avoid personal blogs. I just want to ask, can we rely on the blogs of veterans of the respective field? For example, if I'm researching on a topic related to wildlife, can I rely on a personal blog of Mr. Valmik Thapar as he is expert of that field?
Yeah, certainly you can rely upon his blog, but at the same time, I would merely say that you should refer to his blog, not rely upon his blog. So when we say relying, what is the difference between refer and relying upon? Relying upon means that you are substantiating your finding on the basis of what you have found. So you should not substantiate your finding on what is written by Mr. Valmik Thapar in his blog. Rather, I would appreciate that if he has written a research paper and has got it published in a particular journal, then you can rely upon that. So one is publication in a particular source, in an authentic source, and the second is merely publishing on the internet or anywhere else. So till the time it has an authority of media, we should not rely upon those sources. You can refer to those sources, but should not rely upon that.
Right, ma'am. I'll be taking up the last question for the session, ma'am. It says, if there is not much literature available, for example, in the field of artificial intelligence, then what should be the source and how to move ahead in that topic?
But I think you should increase your skills for, exploring certain resources. And there is plethora of literature which is available on artificial intelligence. Plethora of literature. So you just Google artificial intelligence, you'll get n number of websites where you can explore this artificial intelligence. And believe me, not even a single domain nowadays is working without artificial intelligence. So we are even talking about, having artificial intelligence imbibed into law firms so that if a person has come up with a problem, through artificial intelligence, only the redressal will be given. That this will be the redressal. Should we proceed ahead or should we not? So that is the extent of artificial intelligence nowadays.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am. It was a rather insightful session, and the response is really amazing. We would like to have you again with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Sure, Mehak. Anything for the students. Thank you so much. Yeah.